everybody. This is Bridget, and this is the Maven Insider. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is going to be our episode 7, and really excited to have my friend Rajin on here. Rajin is a wonderful individual. I've worked closely with him in the past, doing a number of different things and events with him. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today. So Rajin, you there? Can you see us?
I am here, Bridget. I am so excited to be a part of your podcast. And not only that, number 7, lucky 7. That is so awesome, though. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm just glad that we can kind of get together and kind of hear what you have to say, right? What your story is, where you came from, and just to tell the audience, what is before we get into all that, what is your current position? What are you doing right now?
Absolutely. So my position is I'm a senior vice president of sales with Meadowbrook Financial Mortgage Bankers. We're a mortgage banker located out in Westbury, Long Island in New York. So that is my position. As I said, I'm a SVP of sales. I do a lot managing of a team and processing, underwriting, marketing, you name it, I do it all.
And you have some amazing, I love some of your video marketing that you have going on and some of the technology you use within what you're doing. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So Rajin, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? How did you get started in the industry? Kind of what brought you here?
So, it's funny. It's a story that I tell to so many people because I've been asked that question many times. And people are just surprised to know that I've been in the industry for 18 years. And everyone's like, but you're like 20 years old. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But I did start very young. I actually started at 21 years old in the mortgage industry. So I was kind of back in the 2003, 2004 era. So I saw the rise of the mortgage industry, and then I saw obviously the collapse and then the rise again. And so, it's so funny about people say, well, how did you even get into the field? Like, did you love mortgages, or was this something like you had a passion for? And look, the reality is, first of all, my background is accounting and economics. So I like numbers, but the crazy thing is I've always been a people person. Like, I love to interact with individuals. I love to speak, to hear their story, to see what they're looking to do. And I talked a little bit about, from my influence from my mom, who was a nurse. And one of my first jobs was working as a ward clerk in a hospital in the ER.
Would have never guessed that, really?
I love medicine. Like, I would be the guy there with the doctor triaging, clients. Triaging, people that are walking in, patients, and saying, okay, based on their complaint, these are the tests that you run. This is what we're going to be looking for. So it was kind of like the same thing. So I found a passion for that. And then it just kind of transformed into mortgages. But at that time, I had just gotten married and I needed a job. And my father had mentioned to me that, he saw an ad in the paper about, loan officers that were being hired by a company. And I said, okay, well, I guess let me try it. I spoke to my wife. She's like, yeah, try it out and see. And I'll tell this really quick story. So the first day I attend, there's a class, and you have to do a 2-week training before they decide if they're going to hire you or not. And I'm sitting in that classroom of about 18 other individuals that all had some type of experience in sales, right? Whether it was insurance, cars, mortgages, real estate, some type of, background in sales. And I'm sitting there like, I've got no clue what I'm doing. I literally just came from working in a hospital. And what am I doing in this room? And there's no way they're going to hire me. And I went out and I bought a book called Mortgages for Dummies.
The yellow book?
The yellow book, Mortgages for Dummies. And I'm like, hey, listen, if I'm going to give this a shot, like, I'm going to read, I'm going to try to prep myself as best as I can and give it my all. And so, like, I started doing that, and I was kind of ahead of a lot of the questions, and I was participating in that training. And so I made it out to 2 weeks, and I was only one of 4 that were hired out of that class of 18. Wow. And that sales manager at that time was like, I really don't know how you're going to fit into this, but, I like your energy and you seem like, you might have a future in this. And he gave me a shot. The first month, I was the first one that originated a loan. And from then on, that was it. It was history. And I just worked my way up.
That's amazing. So you really came, like, had no prior experience, no sales experience, nothing, and you were able to get through that 2-week class and then get a loan nonetheless within that first month too. That's amazing.
And the funny thing is, the first day I got on the phone, so we had a script. And so like, it was like you had a refinance script and you had a purchase script. So if a client called in, because we used to do like different types of ads. So if a client called in, you knew which script to look at. And I never forget, I had a client that called in looking to do a refinance. And I started going into my script about, Mr. Customer, how can I help you? And the guy goes, "You really sound like you're reading from a script." And I laughed, and I kind of just threw it away. And I was like, "Yeah, I was just joking around, and how can I help you?" And we just had a conversation, and we probably talked for about 45 minutes. And from that day, I was sold on the business. I was sold on the mortgage industry, and I found my passion of what I wanted. And from there, like I said, it was just continuing to rise.
Did you use scripts after that?
Never. And it's so funny because any loan officer that I've ever hired, throughout history, I've always used that story. And I say, always be yourself. Always just have a normal conversation. Don't prep yourself. Don't have a script. Just listen to people, hear what their needs are, and then you find a solution of how you can make it happen for them.
That's so true. I really don't like scripts either. I mean, I get in the beginning if you're trying to get, used to maybe your new job position or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, you sound like a robot when you read scripts,
Absolutely. And you always know, and even for me, if someone calls me and is trying to sell me something, and they sound like a robot, I'm kind of like a quick cut and dry yes or no, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
But if someone calls me and I love their energy and they're talking more about me and how's my day and how am I doing and how's everything else, I feel like I want to have more of that conversation with that person. And that's just how we are as individuals, right? As humans, like we don't want someone just selling us, because the minute we feel like we're being sold, we're ready to hang up the phone.
So true.
But
yeah,
so I tell them all the time, I'm like, even if you get a sale or not, or if you get that mortgage or not, just make it about people and that person on the other line. And, just let them know that you're there not for the business, but that you're there to have a conversation.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome advice right there. So your first year, how did you do your first year?
So, okay, great question. So my first year, my first month I originated, the second month I originated. My first year, I did okay. I closed probably about, at that time, maybe about 25, 28 loans, which,
oh, wow.
As a 21-year-old, almost hitting 6 figures back then, it was like, whoa.
That's amazing, yeah.
I can't believe I did that. And I never forget the owner of the company. I built a relationship with him because I was always the first one in the office. I was always the last one to leave. And there was a Sunday program that he used to run ads on, and it ran from, I think on the radio, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening. And there were no salespeople or loan officers that wanted to be in that office. And I said, if I am going to give this a shot, well, I want to be where no one else is so that they can't get the calls. And if any calls come in, I want to be the guy to get it. So this way I can have a better chance of writing more loans. And it turned out, like I said, no one else wanted to do that Sunday program. The owner says, it's all yours. You take it. And the first week we got a couple calls, second week, a couple calls. By the third week, I mean, we were getting like 30, 40 phone calls in that 2-hour span. And I was able to write, 4 loans, 5 loans from those phone calls just on a Sunday.
That's
and so
crazy.
when a lot of the senior people started kind of hearing the buzz about it, they all started going to the owner like, no, well, we're senior. We should be the ones handling that program. And the owner goes, no, because when you guys had the opportunity, you didn't want to take it. So the younger guy came and took your spot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. What a great story. Do they still do ads like that?
So so that company, unfortunately, due to the whole collapse, they ended up closing down.
Mm-hmm.
But, for me, I took a lot away from that because I learned that you can't just rely on just one source of business, right? You have to learn how to market yourself. You have to learn how to brand yourself. And
Can you say that again? Can you just, because some people don't do that. Can you just say that one more time?
Absolutely. You have to learn how to market yourself and brand yourself, because that is your business. That's everything right there. You want people to know who you are. And when they hear your name, they should put a face to that, right? Or your company. They should be able to know who is associated with that company. That is your brand. So for me, back then, I took a lot of that away. And I also looked at certain things that owner did when it came to advertising. I mean, he came up with like gimmick terms, right? Like don't be, I mean, he said it a lot back then, and it's a normal thing, but he was like, don't be house rich, cash poor, right? You should refinance your home, take out the money. If you snooze, you lose. You know, like he would just throw out these things, but people would call in saying, hey, you know, I don't want to snooze and lose. I want to take advantage of refinancing, or I want to take advantage of buying a property. And so I started to look at those things, and I said, you know what, that if I'm going to continue to grow in business, I always have to be thinking about that, thinking about what's ahead. Where's the market going? How can I be in front of the change? So this way I can always be relevant. And that's another really important thing. You have to keep yourself relevant, whatever it takes.
So important. I think if we go a little bit in current time right now, when we talk about the pandemic, right? I think the pandemic, unfortunately, so many people did not adapt as quick as they should have. And that turned out to be really detrimental to them, their businesses, to whatever, they have going on. And it's really a shame, because some businesses were able to thrive during the pandemic, right? And it was all about staying relevant. What marketing was working pre-pandemic, right? In-person marketing, even local networking, all this other stuff where you're in person with people wasn't working all of a sudden. And a lot of people didn't know what to do or how to adapt, or, okay, what do I do? How do I keep going? And some people just kind of went into a shell and didn't do anything. And
it's funny that you say that, because, I always look at it and I never want to get comfortable, right? And it's also another perspective of how long you want to be in business for. If you want to be in business for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, then you always have to be thinking ahead. What is coming? What changes are coming, right? How am I going to adapt? Because that's what major companies are doing. That's what major Fortune 500 companies do all day long. They look at the future. Where's the trajectory? And how do I be with that change, or ahead of that curve, or ahead of that change? And so when that pandemic happened, a lot of the comfortable people in the industry didn't know what to do, because they were so behind, and they didn't want to do social media. They didn't want to do Zoom meetings. They didn't want to do, all these other things that so many people had prepared themselves for. And so when the pandemic hit, they just flipped a switch and moved right into that next phase of how business is being done. And I think that's changed business for the future. The way that we're going to be doing business after that pandemic has definitely changed for the future. And people realize it doesn't always have to be face-to-face anymore, right? We could do things virtually now. We can get business done faster, quicker, easier, more comfortable, but we could keep things moving, and it doesn't have to be stuck in the past of just a slower face-to-face meeting, one-on-one type of thing.
And that's so true, because my friend, she works in Manhattan, right? And this changed. I mean, if we think about during the middle of the pandemic, Manhattan was like a ghost town.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you went through it. It was like a ghost town, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my friend, she works for a very large marketing firm in Manhattan, in the city, and their rules were always like everybody has to come to work, right? Like there was no really, like, if somebody within the business had a remote position, they were very fortunate, because everybody else, walking in, taking the train, commuting. When the pandemic hit, all of a sudden they had to completely adapt to virtual, right? And not just this company, companies across the city in Manhattan had to adapt to virtual workspace. And all of a sudden they found, oh, wait a second, like, we're getting more work done now than we were then, and we're still landing new businesses. And they were able to adapt, and they they kind of put more trust in their employees to make sure that their employees can still do what they need to do. And employees were still doing their jobs. I think that was always a big fear is, well, if we do that, the employees aren't going to do what they need to do. And our profits or our income, whatever, is going to go down. And this pandemic had really showed with other businesses that's not the case.
So an owner actually said to me, believe it or not, he saw productivity increase. And it was because people didn't want to lose what they had, which was the luxury of working from home. Right. And so it actually made them work even harder or more. And then with them not having to commute or, all the other things that happen throughout the day, it allowed them the access to go to work earlier, work later, get their job done more, and get it done according to their time. So we actually saw productivity increase. And one of the other things I wanted to talk about, just simply from just our own personal perspective, right? And how we should think about how businesses are going. For all of us, especially for me, I love the ease of getting everything done on my phone, right? Mm-hmm. Like I can order my groceries on Amazon. I can order things that I need online on Amazon. I can order clothing. And we're seeing that right now. If you look at the economy, most shopping is being done electronically, right? On your phone, because of
even Target, you can place an order and pick it up in your car. And I've been doing it. I thought it was a stupid idea in the beginning, and now I'm guilty of doing it.
And it's so much easier because you think about how much time you're able to save and convenience you're able to have, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, the next thought is, well, why wouldn't people want the ease of that with a mortgage, right? Why wouldn't someone want to be on their phones or their iPads or their computer and put in an application, upload their paperwork, e-sign their documentation, and even do their closings all virtually? So you can literally be in your backyard doing your work and making an application for a mortgage. And that's how times have changed. So now, as individuals, we have to look at ourselves as, if we want things to be easier, then what are we doing to make that same, type of ability or availability for our clients, right? And so that's how we have to look at things that are keeping up.
Well, I love that idea. So tell me a little bit about what you actually just came out with pre-pandemic, right before the pandemic, and how that's worked out for you.
Absolutely. So one of the thoughts, because as I said, I always kind of look at where the market trends are going. And I realized that, over the next 10 years, and this is about 2 years ago, how much more e-commerce was going to play a part and a role in our lives. And so I sat down with the owner of the company and I said, hey, I have a really good idea. Why don't we try to develop a mobile app? Because this way we're going to give more people convenience of doing mortgages through their phone, and then we can reach more people in a larger audience as well. So this way, from our sales staff, from our clients' perspective, it just makes it much easier for them to get their transactions completed. And so we sat down, we talked about it, we went back and forth, and I said to him, you have to do it. I think everything that it allows you to do is really where we need to step into that future and also brand ourselves as a company, saying, hey, we're ahead of the times with a mobile app. And so we went ahead, we did it, we had it all developed and launched it literally about 4 months before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
And it was amazing to see how, when everything was shut down, we did not skip a beat. Our sales staff didn't skip a beat. Our processing staff, our underwriting staff, our closing staff, we did not skip a beat because of that mobile app. And matter of fact, with, one of the major complaints from loan officers or mortgage bankers is that there's so much business. There's such a huge volume of business and they can't handle everything. It was so convenient having our clients using the mobile app to do what they needed to do. And we were able to handle all of that influx of business so much easier. And then we actually found out like other companies started kind of following the pattern. But we liked the fact that we were ahead of that curve. And so it allowed us to really take on a lot of that market share. And I think that's important. See, we set ourselves up in the right place at the right time. And so when there was a shift, we were able to step in that role and take that market share.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And you were thinking ahead, because nowadays millennials want everything at their fingers, right? You were talking about Instacart, or, well, you said a different, Amazon, right? I use Instacart, right?
Yeah.
And why did I start using Instacart? Because during the pandemic, I didn't want to risk myself going to the grocery store. right? And now I use it all the time. So doing an app, like you said, you were really ahead of the curve. Now, what I do want to say, for those who are watching, my mom actually used the app, and she said she couldn't believe how seamless of a process it was. So it's a great app. You guys did a really good job developing it, and I'm sure you guys have done are still working on it. But it was really nice, and I loved how it was paperless.
Absolutely. And we're just about to roll out the final touches of it, which is you actually can be able to do your closing virtually now, where you can e-sign your closing documents, and the ones that need to be notarized, it takes you to a link where there's a virtual notary.
Wow.
You just upload your driver's license, they notarize everything, your loan's closed in about 30 minutes, the bank gets back all the paperwork they need, and that's it.
Wow.
So listen,
That's going to change the industry right there.
the thought that I had in my mind was like, I can literally be on the beach doing my closing and be done in 30 minutes and never have to step foot into an office.
Right. And never have to deal with everybody in the office. I remember closing day. I mean, you have, I don't know, there's probably about 15 people in the closing room at that moment. All these papers, like, I think my book for my mortgage was like this big of papers. So that's amazing that you can just skip all that, do electronically. Let me know when that goes. I can't wait to see that one in play.
Absolutely. And so we're even looking in further, where we actually started that about a year and a half ago, working alongside a branch of IBM with artificial intelligence when it comes to the mortgage industry. And we're trying to also build that into our app so that there is a live chat person that you can ask questions about. Like what are the requirements for an FHA loan? So when you log into the app or you log in online, you can actually ask questions and it'll respond back to you and answer those questions about, what are the differences between an FHA and a conventional loan? What are the requirements for an FHA loan? What are the requirements for a conventional loan? So this way it's more interactive and we can make it more customized for our customers, right? Our individuals that are looking for mortgages. And that's also the future of where things are going, which is
I love how you mentioned about
AI.
the AI. Yes. Yeah, every time, I'm so glad you say this, because every time I mention this to people, they're like, oh no, AI is not going to go anywhere. And I'm like, guys, like AI is already here.
Oh, 100%. People don't even realize how much AI is part of the commerce world, right? Yeah. When you're online and you looked at one thing and then, later on that night or the next day, you're looking at something else and that ad keeps popping up. That's all AI. And not only that, there's so much information that's being fed. And unfortunately, it's just the reality of what it is. All of our social media platforms, we're putting so much information. Yeah. Exactly. So we're putting so much information out there that all these AI companies are taking that all together. They're selling it to all the major companies. But those companies, they know so many points about you and your life and what you're looking for. And that's how in the future, all of these businesses are going to be, in front of you, right? Like that's how they're going to be attracting you, by knowing what you're looking for and your needs are.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So when you're mentioning that that's what you guys are trying to go after now, incorporating AI, I think that's brilliant, right? Because that really is the future. It's already here. It's Facebook, Google. There's been documentaries about it. I don't remember the documentary name, but it was on Netflix, right? And it's already here. It's already been here. And, it's just getting more and more. So I love that. Now, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What have been some mindsets or some habits that have really helped you get to where you're at now?
I do a lot of reading. I sit down a lot and I do this whether in my personal business, in the growth of our company, in the growth of our team, and just in life in general. I'm always, and this was a practice that I started back when I got into the mortgage industry, which was I analyzed everything in my day, whether it was my conversations, the way that I did work, and I analyzed and I said to myself, what could I improve? What could I change? So then maybe it was a phrase that I said a little differently to a client, or how I would address a certain objection that they might have had about something, right? And I would try to see if I changed my focus or what I said, how that person would react. And if they reacted in a positive way that helped my situation, then I would incorporate that going forward. Same thing with the way that I did work, right? I would look at a way that I can improve my time throughout a day, right? My efficiency, how I was able to get things done more efficient. So for me, I'm always researching and looking at how can I be more efficient in this way? How can I be better in that way? What is the future of, what are the main industries to look at in when it comes in just general life, right? And so that's how I knew years ago about AI. And I looked into that. That's how I knew, back about 5 years ago, I hired a personal social media person to do marketing in social media 5 years ago, before anyone really thought about Instagram or how to do social media. And the reason I focused heavily on Instagram at that time was because I read about how Instagram was going to go, the way that they were growing was so much faster than Facebook. And so that was going to be the new wave. So I made sure I went out there and I hired someone for that. And I remember people like my peers, they thought I was crazy, that I was going to hire a full-time marketing person to just do social media. And I think now, 5 years later, we look at how important social media is in our lives, right? And for our business. So it's those things that I do a lot of that I think helps me out a lot. It's just always analyzing, looking at what I could do better, what can I change, what can I tweak, and that's really kind of helped me throughout these years to have more success.
Well, I think what you just said is so true, because some people I find have a really hard time doing like adapting, right? And what I mean by that is not like adapting like their environment, just adapting, maybe they're doing something wrong and maybe they don't have the mindset to realize it's actually them that's doing something wrong, and they don't actually want to change whatever that is that they're doing, that habit. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's the downfall of people sometimes.
The other thing I would probably say is I have a mindset that I can never fail. And even if I fail, to me, that's not failing. That's just learning. You
learned another way of how not to do it.
That's right. And so that's always been a driving factor. I'm never afraid to take chances. I'm never afraid about going big or going home, because for me, there's always a lesson in everything. And fortunately, I haven't had many negative experiences in my life. I've made, big gambles and they've worked out in business, but that's also because I really believe in myself. And I think that's important as individuals, that we have to always take that mindset that we cannot fail, right? And you have to be willing to try it. You have to be willing to take the chance. And if you do, and I think every major entrepreneur or successful person tells you that, right? Some of them might have tried it and lost out, or it didn't work out the way that they anticipated, but it wasn't a failure. It was a lesson, like you said. It taught them how to not have that repeat itself. And so then they changed it, they tweaked it, they redid it again in a different way, and it worked. And eventually it built into success. And I think that's the same thing for so many of us. And the other part about not getting comfortable, right? Always looking to be better than you were yesterday or the year before, or the month before. And for me, that's always how I look at everything. If I close one loan today, I want to close 2 loans tomorrow. If I close 2 loans tomorrow, I want to close 3 loans the next day. And I keep looking at, what do I need to do to get there? What do I need to do?
Always be uncomfortable. Always.
Absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely.
And it's not people who are in the industry that similar to what you're doing or what we're doing, they understand that, right? Who are they're trying to change their mindset. They're trying to be successful. Like, failure is not an option. It's not. Yeah. It's just, okay, all right, maybe I messed up here. Now I know what not to do. Yep. And you're not going to ever do it like that again, you know? So I love that. And the mindset is so, so, so important. So many people I talk to, I always tell them, like, get yourself in the right mindset.
That's right.
Right? Like, the mind has so much to do with everything. And honestly, we all have bad days. Yeah. Right? But it's about overcoming it and putting yourself in that successful mindset. So I love that.
And the other thing I feel like is everyone has to find a routine that works for them, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I used to do years ago was I would, get out of bed, get ready, shower, get ready, whatever, head out to work. And that was my routine. But then I'd walk into the office, I'd have a million things to do, and I would feel stressed out the minute I got into the office. But that dictated a lot of my day because I felt stressed and burdened and frustrated. And so years ago, I started kind of falling into a little bit more of a pattern. I would get up a little earlier. I would exercise. And one of the things that I actually started doing many years ago is, for me, it's more of on a spiritual side. Like I take time, I meditate, I pray, and I do that before I go out into the office. And for those 20 minutes or a half an hour, I just feel so much peace, so much calm. And so when I get into the office, it doesn't matter how crazy that day goes or how crazy my morning is, it sets the tone for the rest of my day. And I found that I've been able to handle, and it's funny because as I've taken on more and more and more, I feel like my stress, which should be throughout, like through the roof,
right,
is so much more less and so calm that I don't feel it. Because now I'm in a different mindset where I can take on whatever is coming my way, but because I'm more relaxed and I understand that it's going to happen regardless. It's how I prepare myself and my mindset to take it on. And so I try to just be calm, be relaxed, take it one at a time, and I get through it. And that's worked a lot for me.
What's funny that you say that is most successful people, they always have a routine that they have in the morning.
Yes.
Right? Like they're most successful people, they don't wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning. They're up way before that because they have other things that they need to get done. They have things part of the routine so that they, when they get started, they have specific times to do certain things, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very common thing amongst those that are successful. I wake up early and I don't go start watching TV. I actually start working and doing other things I need to get done, right?
That's right.
So everybody has who are successful, they always do these things. So I love that you do that too. Now, I wanted to ask you something. So with mortgage officers, right? It's unfortunate, but you're very successful and you've grown, you said you've been in the industry for 18 years, right? So that's a long time to be in this industry. Now, most common thing I hear about people is that, oh, my loan officer doesn't know what they're doing, or, so you have a lot of inexperienced loan officers out there as well. If I'm somebody and I'm searching for a loan officer, right? Is there any questions I should be asking the loan officer to know whether or not they're experienced or not, or whether or not they're the loan officer I should be choosing?
So, I mean, that's a really great question. Number one, the beauty of the world that we live in now is we can Google people, right? We can read reviews. I think that's really important. If you go online and you Google your loan officer and you find nothing on them, I'd be a little worried. If I found, great reviews, I'm more encouraged to then have that further conversation with that loan officer. But I think that's also really important in keeping up with what we talked about, right? If your loan officer is ahead of time and they're online and you can see reviews, you can read what other people just like you were having to say, number one. Number two, it means that they are ahead of that curve, right? And they know how their market is. And most successful loan officers or real estate agents or just people in general understand that, having an online presence is important because it tells me tells you who I am, and it shows you my brand. And so number one, that's what I would be looking for. Number two, ask questions, right? If that loan officer, if you're asking questions, they can't answer it and they can't, or they're fumbling, or they're telling you, I'm going to have to get back to you because I'm not sure, or you could kind of feel it out from them. You know what I mean? And the other thing I always believe in, and I actually tell this to all my customers, which is have multiple conversations with loan officers. Don't just settle for what one loan officer tells you. Even when clients speak with me, I tell them, I say, hey, why don't you call another banker too and just hear what they have to say so you can compare. And first of all, number one, the fact that I even just said that to them, it just like blows their mind because they're like, which person tells me shop around?
Yeah.
Right? Like no one ever says that. But it's important because I want them to know the way that I conduct my business. And my goal is to look out for what's best for them. That's important. And I think that's also something that's important that's kept me over 18 years in this industry. From day one that I got into the industry until now, I've always said, and I teach this to all my staff, I said, always put your customer first. always,
Always.
for
Yeah.
anything else, you make sure they're happy. You make sure you answer their phone calls. You make sure you answer their questions. I don't care how many questions they have. They might have 100 questions. You answer every single one of that question and you treat them with respect. If you do those things, that customer is going to walk away happy and excited to spread the good news of what you did for them. And when I went through that mortgage collapse of 2008 until 10, in the beginning, I was worried that I was going to be like everyone else and I was going to not have a job in the mortgage industry. And that was the end of my career. And believe it or not, that is when I saw my career take off. Because all those clients that I had done right about and made sure that I treated them well, treated them with respect, gave them a fair and honest, loan program and did right for them, they all told their friends, their family, and they were the ones that referred everyone to me. And so all those referrals is what carried me out of that time. And so that's what I always say to my staff. Referrals will take you through good markets, bad markets, but they will continue to allow your business to grow. Just make sure you do the right thing for your clients. That's
so true. Now, referrals could be coming from multiple different avenues too, right?
Absolutely,
I think that's important too to take into consideration. There's multiple different avenues for referrals to be coming in. So your client who's signing the mortgage, of course, they're your customer too. You want to do good by them, but you also have other customers too from those referral types too. So it's all about treating everybody with respect. So I totally love that. I think it's totally great. And I know we're running out of time, but I have maybe one more question for you. For those who are watching and maybe they want to become a loan officer, if you could give them a few tips on what they should be doing or how to become successful as a loan officer, what tips would you give them?
First of all, the first thing I'm going to say to anyone that wants to get into the industry, don't get into it if you think you're going to make a ton of money.
I love that.
Okay? Because that's the number one answer that I've heard from a lot of people throughout the years as to why you want to become a loan officer or a real estate agent or, whatever type of business they do. It's they chase the money. Don't do that. Be in the business because you have a passion for it or just simply because you want to help people, because that is essentially what you're doing as a loan officer, right? You're helping people achieve financial goals. And for our business, it's getting a mortgage. Have a passion for that. And then do the work that it takes, meaning read the books, go online, take the courses, the education courses, which are necessary, and then go take the test and then become licensed, right? That's important. That part of it you have to do. The other part about it in terms of learning the guidelines, that's easy. Any bank that you go to, they'll teach you the guidelines. And then they'll help you to grow your business from there. Or at least that's another part where it's important to choose which lender you're going to choose to work for, because you want to work for a company that believes in helping their salespeople or their loan officers. And then you also want to see, like we talked about, what are their goals for the future, right? What's their outlook? What are they doing? How are they keeping up with the times? So that's important. But the first and most important thing I say to anyone is get into the industry because you want to help people, because maybe you have a background in finances, maybe a background in economics, or just simply like me, just like dealing with people and helping people. And then from there, you can take the next steps of getting, your education done, passing your test to get your license, and then from there, finding the right lender to work with.
I love that.
And like I said, I think a lot of the successful people in the industry have that type of mentality. And a lot of people that get into the industry just because they want to make a ton of money, run into that roadblock or that wall after their first year. And more than likely, they're not in the business the next year after that.
It's so true. It's so true. So you saying that is, I've heard so many people, I want to be a loan officer because those guys make bank. Okay, wait a second. The guys who make bank is because they're actually doing really good. They're really good at what they're doing and the service that they're providing, right? You're providing a service. It's a mortgage, but it's a service nonetheless, right?
Absolutely. And here's the passion that I have. And I think one of the things that's also helped with the success that I've had, I used to sit down with underwriters and I used to pick their brains about guidelines. And I used to ask them, when I would put in a loan, I would say, what are the questions that I should be asking, right? What am I looking for? What is it that you're looking for? And so I started having a lot of those trainings. I started looking at markets and mortgage coupons so I can learn the back end of it. and to read how, the 10-year bond affects the move up or down of interest rates and long-term effects of that. So I can kind of give my clients a little added service of where rates are going. So I took all these different aspects. I even had a Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guideline book that I would read through, and a HUD or FHA handbook that I would go through, and I would read guidelines. So when conditions came back on a loan, on a commitment, I can go through that book and read, what did the guidelines say about assets or bank statements? What did the guidelines say about, the tax returns or the pay stubs? And I would go back to an underwriter and I'd say, hey, you're asking for this, but the guideline is asking for this. Can we consider this way? And over time, I was able to grow and learn and put my mind into that of an underwriter so that I knew more on the front how I can help clients. And that's another way to know the difference.
I love that, because you're trying to understand all the aspects so that whoever you're dealing with, they actually have a chance to actually get a mortgage, refinance, because you're understanding the underwriter's brain a little bit too. Because ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, the underwriter is the one that has the say.
Absolutely. So now the more guidelines the more options you have for your clients, right? So every situation is different for every client, but the more you know, the more you can structure that loan. And so that goes back to your other question about how do you know the difference between a good loan officer and a bad one? If your loan officer is able to know guidelines and say, well, hey, this guideline says this guideline says that, it says a lot about them, that they're not just kind of settling for where they are, but they're looking to be better and know more. And the more they know, the more they can help you.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And you have so much knowledge to give. I mean, honestly, we could probably talk another hour and just go more and more. But we'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. If you had to recommend somebody one book, what book would you recommend?
That's a good question.
That's a hard one.
I definitely have to look that over, because I've read a ton of books, and I'm going blank right now, so I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
That's fine. You should check out my audio books. I have like so many there.
I've had tons and tons that I've read throughout the years, and that's another thing. Like I said, for me, I'm always reading different books to figure out how to be better at sales, how to be better in life. I can't believe I'm going blank.
You get back to me on that. I'm going to say what book changed a lot of my thinking. And it sounds like a simple book because it's really not that long of a book, right? So one book that I'll tell the audience that I read that I thought was absolutely incredible was The 4-Hour Workweek. Okay. Have you heard of that one?
Yes, I have. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that one was one where I read it and I reread it and then I reread it. And then I started implementing everything in that book to adjust towards our individual business. So you get back to us. That's my personal one. Again, there's so many different ones I have though.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? So I just pulled up. I've read Sell or Be Sold, Selling in the Millennial World, The Hypnotic Salesman.
Really?
Persuasion. These that I have right on the tip of my, when I open my phone that I went through, and I read those over and over. Because
you always learn something new each time.
Absolutely. And there's so much that I even have shown my sales staff. Body language says so much. I never realized that, right? Yes. I never realized your posture says so much in a one-on-one meeting with someone, right?
It's hard to remember that too.
Right. Sitting up, or when you want to drive a point home, you sit up. You kind of take a posture like that. You look someone dead in the eye and you say what you need to say. But that's a matter of control. Mm-hmm. So there's all these little things that, when you read, you can start to implement it into your business and just see the impact of it.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rajin, for joining us. I really appreciate the time. I know you're a busy guy. Everybody, if you have any questions for Rajin after you view this episode, don't hesitate to just leave us a message and we'll send it over to him. Again, guys, this is the Maven Insider. This is Rajin. I'm Brigitte. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brigitte. It was so awesome. Had a wonderful, wonderful time.
Awesome. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.